We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. This show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com. You can access podcasts, breaking news analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Let's get started. And you're on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We're very fortunate to have with us a longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donner. Thanks for coming back in, Tim.
Hello, Mark. Good to be here.
So, Tim, this has been one of the most fascinating weeks in modern politics, I think, aside from the November 5th week of 2024, because that was just that was just an amazing piece of political theatrics in all the best possible terms. But there's a huge swath of stories that each one in themselves would be the biggest story of the month, yes, if not for the fact that they're all taking place in the same week. And I guess the first one I want to start with, Tim, is what's happening with Tesla. Now, not talking about the stock price. I'm not doing a Tim Walls here, but there are attacks taking place on dealerships, on vehicles, on charging stations, and even on people who drive Teslas. There's a horror encroaching across America based on people's purchases. Tell me what's going wrong.
Well, this is what we would call orchestrated terrorism. Because terrorism is defined as acts of violence with a political motive, which is precisely what's happening here. I mean, the irony of it, Mark, though, is that, Tesla was the beacon of hope for the left to electrify vehicles and turn us into a green energy economy. Now, of course, forget the fact that it doesn't actually save the environment because of the need for the number of rare earth elements that are necessary to build a Tesla. But they've now turned on themselves, and they don't realize how crazy they look to the average person who doesn't obsess about politics like we do. They look at this on their way to work or in passing on their computer screen, and they say, wait a second, I thought these people loved Tesla. Now
I thought we loved Tesla, yeah.
But, this is, I can't think of a better sign or better exhibit A of the left's absolute desperation, because Trump has taken office again. He's got 4 years, which means he doesn't give a whit about re-election because he can't run again. And he is really fulfilling every promise. He is using a steamroller to just, devastate everything that the Democrats hold dear, like a big federal government, like lots of excessive spending, like a big federal payroll. And they're helpless to do anything about it because they don't have any control in Congress either. So they are reduced to trying to bring down Tesla. And it seems to me that, since Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, that dropping his stock price, and by the way, he only owns about 15% of Tesla. So they're only hurting him to some degree. He's the richest man in the world. How is the stock dropping by 100 points really going to hurt Elon Musk so badly? So it's ill-conceived in that sense. Do they really think that that's going to hurt him personally? All it does is hurt them and hurt all their fellow leftists who own Tesla. And by the way, a survey was done, it was 2 or 3 years ago, and it revealed that by a 2-to-1 margin, people who own Teslas are people of the left. So, I mean, they're killing their own, and it is futile, and it's extremely unpopular. obviously. I mean, domestic or any type of terrorism is generally unpopular with the
You
public.
you
But
have
it just shows how desperate they are.
you have just given me the perfect segue here, Tim. There has been some polling by Neapolitan News Service, great pollster, really, run by Scott Rasmussen. Um, so this polling from Neapolitan News Service, it says that protests against Tesla, 53% approve of it as a regular form of protest, with 39% in opposition. But here's the kicker: 20% of those surveyed said that vandalism is an appropriate form of protest, Tim. Now, that is vandalism, that is criminality, that is attacking of property, is an appropriate form of protest. 20%. What do you make of that?
Well, what I make of it is how well it lines up with the percentage of Americans who call themselves progressive, about 20%.
What a
So,
coincidence. Yeah.
you do the numbers, but progressives have increasingly been willing to expand their arsenal in terms of what they're willing to do to take
Yep.
down normal, red-blooded, typical Americans with traditional values. It is remarkable, though, especially since they know that this is domestic terrorism. This
It
is not
is.
random acts of vandalism. This is not some guy
Yeah.
in a ghetto breaking into someone's car and stealing it, or even carjacking or whatever it is. This is an organized terrorism, and you've got to assume or suspect at the very least that if you trace it back, that somehow George Soros and his Open Society Foundation has got to be at the root of this somewhere. And look, the
There'll certainly
20%.
be some organization. No, I don't know if it's Mr. Soros's or not, but there'll certainly be some organization that's funding transport, funding flyers,
Well,
funding
certainly you
organization,
look at the
communications networks.
signs. Just
Yeah.
look at the signs. You have random people who are unaffiliated with each other who have signs that are drawn up exactly the same way,
It's
making it look like they're homemade when you can tell that they're not.
yes.
And
Yeah.
so these are also professional terrorists, professional protesters, professional demonstrators. I think if you looked into it, you'd see these are all the same people, or many of the same people who were involved in these anti-Semitic campus protests,
Yeah.
and probably during the riots during the summer of 2020 after George Floyd, after
Yeah.
the death of George Floyd. It's that same group. But let's put it this way: the 20% that say that vandalism is an acceptable form of political expression, I don't think you would find a single Republican in that group. And you wouldn't find maybe a lot of, ordinary
Yeah. Blue
Democrats.
dog Democrats.
Right.
Here's the funny thing, Tim. Whenever I hear the word progressive, I think 85% communist. Tell me I'm wrong. But that's the way it seems to me. I think progressive, there's about 15% who are quite focused on specifically gender issues. But the vast majority there, I'm thinking, scratch a progressive, find a communist.
It's
Last word on that.
mostly, yes, because their deconstruction is just like the communists are, like socialists are. They want to deconstruct the republic. They don't like the freedoms that we have, really. They want to control your speech. They want to control your lives. They want to control the courts, the political process, the White House, the Congress, and they will do anything to achieve those ends.
By any means necessary, I believe was the rallying call. We'll be back with Tim Donner after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.